So in a nutshell, we are going to hear various angles of the future of Africa's international relations through our distinguished writers. As an editor of the Peking University Africa think tank, I'm privileged that I worked with this team, and I'm sure that they're going to share with you the quality they shared in the report. I also thank my chief editor, Leticia, and the PATT events coordinating team, the brains behind this meeting, the guys that make things happen, Sharon and Dixon. I also thank you so much. I thank Professor Liu Haifang. Professor Liu Haifang, Dixon has already introduced her, but I also, on behalf of the Peking University Africa Students Association, where I serve as president, I'm also honored to further introduce her and welcome her to this meeting. She's not only the director of the Peking University Center for Africa Studies, but she's also a very good friend of the African community in Peking University, and also a strong focal point on working towards the development of stronger China-Africa relations.
I'll just call upon the next speaker, who is Julia. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrongly. Okay, thank you. So she'll be talking about China-Africa projects, technology transfer, and absorptive capacity. So yeah. Then as soon as she finishes, I hope by then Leticia will be back, so we'll have her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you everyone for having me here, and thank you for the introduction, and to the editors and Professor Liu Haifang, all the people that put really much effort into this. I prepared a quick presentation on my paper, and I would like to share with you. It's actually more a reflection on the nature of China-Africa relations over infrastructure under the lens of technology, knowledge transfer, and absorptive capacity. So I wish you to guide through my conclusions, taking upon some keywords, why the relations is multi-faced or multifaceted. It's because I think when we talk about China-Africa relations, and also in terms of infrastructures, we really need to cross a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary environment. We cannot look at it only from one aspect rather than one other, and we should call for policymakers as well as business-involved people and private and public sector both, and all to cooperate with each other. While researching on it, we all know that the China-Africa relations have been strengthening upon the last decade, and especially as regard with foreign trade, but also foreign direct investment. And we know that infrastructure has made people talk a lot since the investment in infrastructure from China to Africa has been really massive. When we talk about infrastructure and we look at the infrastructure industry, we should use it as a perfect example of how meaningful it is also for the future relationship of the two parties and all the parties involved, really, because in the past 10 years, China has been really supporting the infrastructure sector in the continent, and infrastructure leads necessarily to development. So we have seen a lot of investment in energy and power and all the related manufacturing and any kind of infrastructure, really. And it's not by chance that China understands that most of the highest growing economies and fastest growing economies in the world right now are in fact in Africa. So yeah, that's why the infrastructure is essential to maintain this growth and maybe also accelerate it a bit. So when we talk about knowledge transfer and technology, we don't only talk about the objects themselves, but to create real innovation, we need to talk also about what kind of information is transmitted and how is it passed from the origin to the recipient. This in practical means that if I'm going to support infrastructure, I need to make people, on the other hand, able to receive the correct information that I'm passing, not just the tools, so that then they can replicate it and operate it by themselves. And this, of course, it's not my own take, it's a whole bunch of literature about it, which leads eventually to development and sustainable development. So what I found in my research, and then I wrap it up, it's that there's a few cases of very interesting enhancement of this transfer and of absorptive capacity in particular. We can see it in the agricultural sector. I've mentioned that in Madagascar, different research centers have been set to demonstrate and research about agri-technologies, and also the education sector that we all know has been very strengthened and like just push forward to bilateral cooperations in order to make this transfer of information and knowledge possible. And as well as in the manufacturing sector, we have seen a lot of public investors, but so SOEs, but also private investors interested in actually passing some skills to the domestic workers and to the domestic environment, recipient environment. So yeah, these are my takes on. I think there is much more to research in the future, and that this is a key aspect of what will bring upon China-Africa relations in the future as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia, for your presentation. It's really borders on a major issue of the China-Africa relations, especially when we talk about infrastructure and technology transfer, because as we know, Africa is deficient infrastructure-wise, and China is like a ready partner to help the African continent, develop its infrastructure capacity to build roads, bridges, to connect itself and other countries around. So I'm really grateful for your presentation. So I'll keep the floor open. Oh, okay, Letitia is here. So we'll quickly have Letitia's presentation, and then we'll move to the question and answer session. So Letitia, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, Dixon. And thank you, Sharon, also for organizing this event. So as you know, my article was on the future of the relationship between the EU and Africa. And I chose this topic for two reasons. The first is that the EU and member states together are still Africa's biggest donor at the moment. And because from 2015 to 2019, I was working at the Embassy of Ethiopia in Brussels, where I was following on a daily basis the EU policy towards Africa. So as you may know, this year, in 2020, the CPA, the Cotonou Partnership Agreement, that's a big legal framework uniting the EU and ACP countries, so Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific countries, will be renewed. So this year will be a very critical time for the relationship between the EU and Africa. And the CPA is entered into force in 2000, so 20 years ago. And when you want to look at a clear assessment of the CPA, it's really hard to do. Because actually all aspects of cooperation between the EU and Africa fall under the CPA. And because everything is Cotonou, it's really hard to know what resulted from Cotonou, basically. So what we have to do is look inside at the content of Cotonou. And Cotonou is based on three pillars: a political one, trade, and development. So the political aspect, the political pillar, is clearly the weakest one because it hasn't really done anything. I mean, it had no concrete impact in African countries or any ACP countries. And it didn't create any kind of political alliance between Africa and the EU on the global stage. When you look at former big political platforms or events that took place for the past 10 years, for instance. Then you have trade. trade isn't really great either. I mean, if you look at the figures for the past 10 years, if you compare 2009 and 2019, it's more or less the same. So you can really say that it was a big success on trade. So clearly development, the first pillar, was a big success of the CPA. Because basically it was used to channel a lot of money from the EU to ACP countries. But because development is hard to define, it's even harder to assess. Then again, you can look at the figures, but it's really hard to say, okay, because you gave that amount of money to that country, it's reduced poverty levels to that level. It's really hard to say that. The biggest change since 2000 was the way the money was allocated, because you had a donor, a recipient country, let's say Ethiopia, and the EU side, who would decide together how the money would be used and allocated together. So it's a little bit more equal on that aspect. So in conclusion, for the past 20 years, well, in 2000, they had this new big framework that was very ambitious. But in the end, it became just a very technical legal agreement to transfer money to developing countries. And this year, I don't think it's going to evolve significantly. There is a Africa-EU summit scheduled to take place in Brussels this year in fall. I don't think you will have a big change when it comes to the current structure. The only development that's going to take place is that the EU is going to stop dealing with the ACP as a group, and instead they're going to work with Africa, the Caribbean states, and Pacific states separately. So the ACP group is going to become an empty shell. So I think that in the upcoming months and years, it's going to be very interesting especially to notice the impact of Brexit, because it just took place and now it's done. The UK has left the EU, and the UK was the biggest single individual country when it comes to development. So it's going to have an impact. And also to notice the impact of the current situation, the pandemic, on the EU budget, because the EU Council still has to give the green light to the next EU budget from 2021 to 2027. So we don't know exactly how much will be given to Africa this time and how it's going to be used. So yes, we should look at this. And yes, that's it. Yes, thank you for attention.
Oh, wow. So Leticia, thank you very much for your presentation. And I found it fascinating, to look at the different aspects of international relations with Africa, looking specifically at the EU. I think I was reading through your report and I saw you mentioned a bit about migration, how this would impact, the relationship between Africa and Europe because, of this migration and especially around the MENA region. So it's quite fascinating to see how, especially the pandemic would, shaping the Africa-EU relationship. So yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. And now we'll move straight to the Q&A session. So if we have questions to ask the authors, Julia and Leticia, please, we can just signify by, clicking the button to raise our hands and unmute yourselves. So I would start. Julia, I listening to your presentation, I just remembered something I read somewhere, and I would like to clarify with you. With looking at China-Africa relations and the technology transfer, knowledge transfer, and then infrastructure development, it's kind of toes along the line of China's own development experience. So I'm asking, do you think that Africa can also toe that same line? Because for me, now we're looking at new changes in the governing structures. WTO rules have changed, and then now we're looking at 5G, and so a lot of things have changed between when China experienced rapid development and the current situation right now, and we're living in the great power contention, America, China. So do you think that Africa's need to copy China would lead to a development trajectory, looking at the difference in both eras? Yeah, you can.
Okay, thank you for this question. So I think personally that in China's own experience of development, there have been a lot of development model. I mean, it's a whole branch of research, and policymakers all over China have been studying and approaching it for various angles. When it comes to China, I think when it comes to this question in particular, we should look also at China itself first and ask ourselves, how was China able and willing to modify or alter other countries' developmental models to approach their own country? And the response to this was that very quickly China understood that there was the need for not copying, but maybe like getting some inspiration, pass me the term, and then adjust to their own situation. And what I think will be in these terms on like the China-Africa front is that probably Africa will be able to learn and adapt something like this. It's not a teacher-student situation here. It's more of a cooperation, and also I don't think China wants to put themselves on the spot of the teacher necessarily, even if it has been criticized many times to do so, and even if it might seem, or it might have done so in the past. I think that China is very resilient and also enlightened enough to understand and change its approach. In fact, it's already changing. I know we haven't touched upon like resources and predatory behaviors, but these are one of the most common critiques and opinions, and I do think that something is moving and something is changing towards different directions that will enable and African countries in particular to take upon something and then adapt to their own situation. I mean, this is what also transfer of technology, knowledge, and innovation it's about, right? Take something that exists and then adapt it and create something new that responds to your own needs. So yeah, I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, thank you very much for your response, and you really touched on something that caught my fancy. It's, you know, China not wanting to occupy that teacher's position. I think Lukman can confirm my next statement. In one of my classes here, the lecturer, the Laoshi, mentioned something that China is not chasing to be, China doesn't want to see itself as being at the very top, because once you're at the top, the next step is probably going down, you know, so it's majorly wants to cooperate, you know, just having more of partnerships instead of alliance, or, you know, dominating the narrative. So yeah, thank you very much.
Very much. I would also want to add one thing, that when you put yourself in that place and that position, you are exposed, and in this case worldwide, because worldwide there is a growing interest. So like there's always been interest towards Africa, but like growing and growing, right? You expose yourself worldwide to everyone's critiques and everyone's, and like I don't think that is what China is doing right now, you know. No, I don't think.
Okay. So the floor is open. Anyone who has any other questions to ask, and please, we can try to turn on our video so that we see our faces. So I saw Lynn Amber's hand. Yeah.
I think Lukman has something for the teacher.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I have a question for Letitia. I'm now based in Brussels as well, so I have a question on your research about how does EU's response to the China-Africa cooperation and how their perspective on the EU, Africa, and China trilateral relations. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted by Dixon, so I can speak now. As I think you know that the EU has been responding very negatively to basically every step of the Africa-China cooperation. Basically every year there is a big declaration about how African countries should be careful when dealing with China, that, you know, the EU, they've been there for a very long time and they're, you know, Africa's real friends. And even, for example, Emmanuel Macron, he went to Djibouti last year. He gave a speech. The first thing he said was to warn the president of Djibouti to be careful when dealing with China. So clearly they're very, very worried because they know that they're losing ground to China and they don't know how to catch up. Like if you look at the past 10 years, there has been a change in the language of the EU towards Africa. Now it's all about, instead of saving Africa, you have to see Africa as a market, as economic opportunities, but it didn't materialize when you look at the numbers. There's not much investment when it comes to Africa, EU countries towards Africa. And about the triangular cooperation between the EU, China, and Africa, I don't think it could happen, not at the moment. First of all, because even the EU doesn't really have a real China policy. It's very divided, undecided. So I don't see how they could work together with China to help Africa develop or invest together. So I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
Okay, Charlotte will go next. Yeah.
Thanks for answering for this question. So following your presentation about the so I have two questions. So the first one is for the EU policies. So you have mentioned that Emmanuel Macron has visited Djibouti about this warning. So I'm wondering, what is your perspective on the role of African agencies, of how they have seen, because in this way it could be a counterbalance, for example, from Djibouti's case, how you can have this leverage between its cooperation with China and the EU. And my second question is for the report on the technology transfer in the infrastructure ones. So in the report, you have mentioned that China's investments, or the FDI, has generated a lot of employment or some job opportunities. So I'm wondering if you have done any research or any qualitative ones to see how it was implemented, because from the official figures, there are a lot of numbers of this job generation, but in reality, is it more for Chinese migrant workers or is it for local ones? Thanks.
Yes, I think Julia can go first. I need to do some research.
So the first thing I want to say is that thank you for your question. It's very insightful and also very, you know, on the heat of the debate. I think many people are questioning the same thing. When it comes to public figures, one thing that I have noticed throughout my research is that what has been published up to now, there is very little about, for example, the division of these investments. So which sectors is it going to? How exactly is it spread, like divided monthly, quarterly, yearly, etc. And also the channels, you know, it uses to be divided and then redistributed to the recipients. So this is one thing to say, that the figures are still very much unclear. I do think the job generation, the generation of job opportunities, it certainly regards Chinese migrant workers and also not only labor, like basic labor, but also skilled workers, simply because of the fact that a lot of SOEs, and when SOEs have opened to Africa, from China to Africa in general, they were looking for a market to expand their infrastructure power. So in the infrastructure relationship between China and Africa, we also have to look at the demand-supply kind of relationship and discourse. And it's very important because China had at the time and still has the necessary supply for a growing demand in Africa. So it was kind of natural for these big state-owned enterprises to just expand towards new markets, since China has the capabilities and the capacity and also the resources to be able to meet these needs in demand, both locally, domestically, and abroad, in this case, in Africa. And then we have seen also with the BOR countries at large. Coming to the local labor, I think that the trainings that have been happening in some countries, and especially in the 6 fastest growing economies in sub-Saharan Africa, are a good start and a good beginning, like a positive shift in this narrative, if you want. So in this case, I'm talking about Nigeria, Ethiopia, and I have researched and I have seen that in this project seem to have been involved a lot of domestic workers as well. I do think, and as I have explicited at the ending of my paper, that more research is necessary, but also in particular, more research from the policymaker side, probably to create more opportunities of bilateral cooperation in terms of job creation, and understand how we can fairly, and they can fairly share the percentage of jobs and people involved bringing this construction. Yeah, I hope I answered.
Letitia?
Yes. So actually about your question, I just shared an article I wrote about Emmanuel Macron's visit to Djibouti last year. And what I found very interesting is that when Emmanuel Macron was complaining and warning Djibouti about China, what the president of Djibouti replied was, but we've been asking you to come and invest in our country for years, and you never came, and now you come and you're just telling us not to be careful with Chinese. And basically, I think it's a good summary of this China-EU-Africa relation is that the only reason there was a change in the language and the rhetoric about Africa on the EU side is because of China, I think, mostly, and also a little bit the migrant crisis, but mostly it's because they're worried. And when it comes to leverage, I wouldn't say that it's leverage in the sense of, oh, I don't like the conditionality that the EU is pushing on me, so I'm going to stand with China instead. No, it's more that China has more partners than before, so that's more opportunity to develop. That's it. It's I think that most African countries now they're not standing with China or the EU or with the US. Sorry, they don't have to make a choice. It's not like a real Cold War. It's not the 80s anymore. So I would say it's a big change now compared to before. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much, Letitia and Gula. Do we have any more questions? Gregor Bauer? Such a, okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thanks to both of you for your presentations and all the introductory notes as well. I wanted to ask, well, probably I'd be up for the both of you, how you feel about sort of leveraging the EU-China competition. So looking at African countries as seeing this competition as a tool for their own agency, and if, as Letitia said, if there's not that much prospect yet for EU-China cooperation in development, especially infrastructure development, if the fact that there is competition between these, if this can sort of spur on further development as well, rather than hamper it. And I've seen parallels more in Central and Eastern Europe, or in Italy as well, where even though, as you said before, that the EU might be the leading trade partner in those countries or in that region, cooperation with China, even though it might be on a smaller scale, can be leveraged very well for increasing cooperation with the EU, or also putting pressure on the EU. I wonder how you feel about that, and then if maybe cooperation isn't really the short-term future, if that competition can still be helpful, I suppose, for the agency of those countries themselves.
Letitia,
Yes.
do you want to go first?
Sorry, I think I missed part of the question because I was disconnected at some point. So I just came back now. I don't know what happened actually. So
Gregor, you're on.
maybe you should.
Can I repeat? Yeah, more just in summary, if how helpful the fact is that it's not really cooperation that we'd be seeing in the next few years between China and the EU, but that it is competition. If that is to some countries more helpful, how you've maybe seen some African countries use that competition for their own benefit as well. There's maybe parallels to do with the China and the US as well, where even though, as Letitia, as you said earlier, I think that the EU is a leading trade partner for many countries, using China, even on a smaller scale, can maybe be used as leverage to increasing or improving or like maybe putting pressure on EU involvement as well. I wonder if you've noticed like how that's used, how it works, and if that can be as helpful as maybe a future cooperation dynamic would work.
Okay, so actually I met last year with Louis Michel, who is a former EU EU Commissioner for Development. So he was, for many years, he was Mr. Africa in Brussels. And he was trying to create some kind of think tank or foundation working of this EU-Africa-China relation. I'm not sure he has managed to do it. So it's a real issue, I think, in the mind of many officials in Brussels, but I don't see how it could happen. Even when you talk about competition, I don't know if there is a real competition because nothing is really moving on the EU side. Because every 2 years, you have these big ambitious plans. Like I think 2 years ago, Jean-Claude Juncker, who was then the president of the Commission, launched the EEIP, EU External Investment Plan. I think he was planning to maybe raise 47 billion of public and private investments to Africa, and I don't think it materialized. I think nothing happened. So on the EU side, there is no real Africa policy. I mean, even this year in March, there is a new strategy for Africa that was released, I think it was on 10th of March this year. And this new strategy is basically the same, if you look at the content, it's the same as the one from 2007 and 2005. Like there are a few updates, but it's not very ambitious and there is nothing new. They're always talking about partnership and investment and migration, but I think to me it seems like the EU is a little bit sleeping. Still sleeping on Africa, and procrastinating a lot, mainly because there is no agreement within EU member states, I guess. So it's hard to talk about a real competition. You don't have like two equally active competitors, in my opinion. And when it comes to African country, it really varies, but I don't think I've ever seen or read anything about a country refusing to deal with the EU and only dealing with China or the other way around. I think that the main problem for African countries in Brussels is that there is a lack of lobbying at the EU level. There is no real strategy for. When I look at what the Ethiopian embassy was doing, and most African countries don't have an EU policy, an EU strategy, except for Morocco. So I think that they're doing what they can by talking to everyone equally, but you don't have a very clear strategy that clearly defines to really take advantage of all the possibilities offered by China on one side and the EU on the other.
At large, I would agree with Letitia. I really agree also on the fact, like, it really resonates with me when before she mentioned the EU is sleeping. Actually, the EU is not only sleeping, it's just sitting on itself, and it's very, very blind. It's blind towards Africa. So it's not that blind when it's about, you know, to follow the trends and adopt the narrative or just the vocabulary, like Letitia mentioned before, just, you know, change the vocabulary from aid to opportunity and to, you know, new markets and new strategies. But it is very, very blind indeed to consider, I think, at large, the African continent as, you know, as entirely, like, as China is considering it, maybe. And also, you mentioned, Letitia, the lack of unity within the EU. It's probably the biggest problem of the EU itself, because there are many ideals in this moment. Nothing much has been put into practice, and there is a great division among countries. There are a lot of different trends around. There is a rising nationalism. The talk towards Africa is mainly, and the mainstream talk about Africa, it's mainly about the migration and how to cope with it, or how to solve the migration problem. I mean, like Italy, Libya, it's one of the most exemplary cases in that. But we don't want to be farther on that sphere. And on the other hand, I also think that the EU towards China is very careful. It's very careful. It's very, maybe not blind, but it's still not sure what they will want to do. Like, fully embrace and adopt what, when, where. So yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't undermine the influence of the US as well in this triangle.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Lukman, please briefly. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Letitia, and thank you for your presentation. I just want to the EU-African relations, and when you look at the impact of COVID-19 on this issue, and you notice that there is a new trend that happened, and which is you notice that a whole lot of Chinese enterprise, that SOEs or private Chinese companies that are operating in Africa, some of them started doing a whole lot of and let me say, I want to call it donation, but kind of humanitarian things, which is quite new. Because what you see basically is you see just Chinese companies doing solely their business. They solely deal with something human. And some authors have even said that moving forward in the post-COVID, we might be seeing Chinese company or let's say some Chinese civil societies in Africa moving forward. It's quite new. And even though it's not happening yet, but because of what happened during this COVID, we might start seeing, and that is basically what is known for the EU, or let's say for European or probably the West, to have some kind of civil societies and others in Africa. So I just want to sample your opinion about that. Do you think that we might start having Chinese civil societies in Africa, or or let's say non-governmental organizations? So that's because it's probably we start having Chinese non-governmental organizations in Africa moving forward in post-COVID period. Do you see it happening? And if yes, how do you think they would operate? Is it going to be the way the traditional non-governmental organizations that we have, most of them that are affiliated to Europe or probably the United States? Do you think they will follow the same path in doing their developmental project in Africa? I just want to talk to you about that.
Okay, thank you, Lokman. I think that, as you said, China's reaction after the COVID-19 crisis was very interesting because it's been evolving. It's evolving very fast. It's not, I mean, so China's presence in Africa is not the same it was 2 years ago.
Letitia?
Juanita.
Okay, I guess it's poor network. Maybe when she comes back. Okay, probably when she comes back, would revisit the question. We'll move to the next section of the presentations, and I would like to call upon Lukman Akintola to give us a brief about his article entitled "Assessing the Impact of Africa's Security on AfCFTA." Yeah. Lukman, floor is yours.
Thank you, Dixon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Professor Liu who like a mother to every one of us. Thank you so much. And for me, I feel like AfCFTA is an important year. 2020 is supposed to be a very good year for us in Africa, the African Union, and of course, we have a whole lot of big projects. AfCFTA is one of them, which is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So we also have the Silencing the Gun project. So there are scores of projects that have been slated for this particular year. However, the pandemic has really affected a whole lot of things. So I decided to write an article that assessed the security impact of, we all know that the state of Africa in terms of security issues, there are a whole lot of security that we deal with. But what I tried to do in the article was to categorize some security issues as traditional and some as non-traditional issues, traditional security issues. So traditional security issues are basically armed conflicts, like the Boko Haram, like the this thing in Somalia and all that. So these people and all these armed conflicts, in terms of also banditry, so these are scores of traditional security issues that we face. However, non-traditional security issues would be a lot of human security issues, which COVID-19 also falls in that category. So, what are the impact of all these security issues on AfCFTA? Because AfCFTA is an initiative that is mainly aimed at fostering economic integration in the continent. So it is meant to foster to aid free movement of persons, goods, and services with the total removal of both tariff and non-tariff barriers in the continent. So, and the goal is to be able to bring about 1.3 billion people together so that we can trade freely within the continent. That being said, we also have some new initiatives that were also that have been launched before now. We have the African Single Passport. We also have the Single African Air Transport, the initiative that is mainly to be able to make people to fly across the continent without visa. So these are the initiatives that are mainly to aid free movement of persons. And the central idea is to be able to promote economic development and, of course, to improve intra-African trade. At the moment, intra-African trade is just 3% of the whole world trade, while within EU alone, EU had 61% alone at the moment. So that's to tell you how low intra-African trade it is. So is presently. So considering all these things, so the security issues, a lot of critics have made us know that achieving AfCFTA will be very, very difficult, considering the fact that even the free movement ECOWAS protocol that we have in ECOWAS states, a lot of writers and authors are already complaining that we should stop this free movement because we have the issues of farmers' herders clash in some part of Nigeria. And a lot of people have said that it is because of movement of herders from neighboring countries. That's why we're having some of those issues. So some believe that by the time we have free movement within the continent, so that means that somebody coming from probably Somalia could bring some arms and come into Nigeria. So there is a whole lot of pessimistic ideas about this. However, I feel that if African leaders can first focus on their domestic issues, which is very, very important, domestic in terms of their own security domestic issues, both traditional and non-traditional domestic issues. And I was able to give two major recommendations. First is that we have if sub-regions, ECOWAS, in terms of for the West African West African states, the South African states, and North Africa, and of course the Central Africa. So if these sub-regions can work together in promoting security in their own different sub-regions, there is possibility that we'll have improved security in different parts of the continent. And if that could work, possibly that means that we will enjoy stability to a large extent in the continent. And that, of course, will definitely make AfCFTA to thrive. However, that does not mean that there are not we have some existing cooperation in terms of security-wise. Some of this, like in Africa, like in West Africa, we have the multinational joint task force that are working in the Sahel region and in some part of Nigeria, basically to address the issue of Boko Haram. So I know that that is in its place. But the truth is that just last month, Idris Deby, the president of Niger, just single-handedly pulled out of that multinational joint task force because he felt they are not actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that means that that platform is not effective. So if we can have an effective sub-regional body and that can cooperate by having effective intelligence gathering and sharing of information, and also working together to like the joint military drill. So this makes it very easy for us to have improved security within the continent. And of course, if there's improved security, it becomes very easier for us to improve, for us to achieve the aim and objective of AfCFTA. So, and lastly, I also try to say that we need an inclusive AfCFTA because this is where the issue of women security comes in. The women, youth, these are the people that are vibrant. They are doing a whole lot in terms of economy. Like for instance, of about 40% of Africans, they are involved in informal sector. And if we have the large sector of the continent in the informal sector, that means that these people need to be part and parcel of this kind of project. So, and at the moment, I doubt if the plan and all that really consider these people. So the youth, which are basically that are in the SME sector, and of course the women, they are doing a whole lot of things. So these people also need to be included in the planning and implementation of AfCFTA. So I believe that if this can be done, definitely, hopefully we'll have an improved intra-African trade, and of course maybe any other things we also move in place. So these are the things I was able to share. However, there's still a whole lot to research. Basically, with COVID-19, right now COVID-19 has cost it has cost us nothing less than about 3% in a whole lot of African GDPs right now. Nigeria alone has lost 4.4% in its GDP in Q1. So this shows that it has cost a whole lot of things. So hopefully we can have more research that will look at how these new trends of events will affect, of course, affect the implementation of AfCFTA moving forward. Thank you so much. That's that about the article. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lukman Akintola. Your article touched upon an area I love writing about, which is on human security. And I like the fact that you mentioned that many African countries their military especially is used to conventional warfare. They're not used to asymmetrical warfare like you have with Boko Haram or terrorist groups and bandits or like the headsmen like you have in Nigeria. So it's very important for us, for our military to tilt towards this area to be a lot more reactive to these terrorist groups, and then be passive in the sense of humanitarian assistance to also give psychological support to the victims of some of these attacks. And then you also touched on the area of collaboration between different African states. I think it's one area we need going forward. So yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. And then we'll call upon our last presenter for today, Luyolo, and he'll be talking on COVID-19, the impact on Africa. So, Luyolo, the floor is yours. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me, Dixon? Okay. No, thanks for the opportunity. I guess I'll start by first, congratulating you, Chair, and the team who produced the report. It was extremely impressive, so I must say congratulations. And putting it together, during this time, must have been very complex and so on. So great job. I'm in a vehicle. I don't know if you can see, but I was driving somewhere and I wasn't going to make it in time to participate in it. So I stopped on the side of the road because I said, there's no version of reality in which I'm missing out on this. And I'm glad I did. I found the presentation so far to be very, insightful and enlightening. One theme that came up for me in those that is related to what I'll be talking about is African productivity. In Letitia's piece, there's a, you spoke about the different bodies that the EU has set up, and what does African productivity look like in the context of Africa-EU relations? Is Africa in a position to set agendas, to chart a course within the context of the relationship? In terms of skills transfer, what does African productivity, any of these respects, that was a question that was on my mind. But that goes into what I was.
Can you hear me, Luyolo? Your internet connection is it's bad and yeah. Can we try again?
Yeah. Can you hear? Can you? Let me see if I switch off my video. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is this better?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
You can go ahead.
Okay. Well, let's try it like this. I don't know where you left, where you lost me, but anyway, I was just talking about the theme of African proactivity, and that the previous speakers brought that up for me. What does African proactivity look like in the context of the Africa-EU relationship, skills transfer, and maybe the free trade agreement is an example of that. But anyway, I don't think I'm by any means an expert on COVID, because as this thing unfolds every day, each of us is learning new things about its effect on us, and our societies and how they deal with it. So what I'll do briefly is just to cover what's happened up until now in Africa as relates to COVID-19. And then what the future might hold. So so can you still hear me, Dixon?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Good. So I usually compare Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa and COVID-19, to somebody standing in the line of a bullet, which is coming to them in slow motion and not moving out of the way. Because the first case of COVID-19, I think, came to Nigeria at the end of February. So as African countries, we saw this thing start in China at the end of December, move to Europe, the United States, and then eventually reached Africa without real preemptive measures being taken. Borders were still open. Healthcare systems weren't really rigged up to try and deal with it. So I think before the virus arrived in Africa, it really, it was business as usual, and I think we were in some sort of a dream state where we thought it wouldn't really reach us. But once it did reach the continent, we did see some proactivity, and many countries on the continent went into really strict lockdowns, and almost all at the same time, which to me was an example of what effective coordination on the continent looks like, because there was coordination within the AU and the lockdown measures were more or less the same across the countries that did implement them. So that lasted for I'd say a month or so, where lockdowns were instituted. But then the reality on the continent is that the economies are weak and fragile. So with the lockdown measures came a restriction, of course, on economic activity, particularly in the informal sector, with the restriction on movement of people. And that put people who were already at risk from an economic standpoint even more at risk. So with each passing day of lockdown, you saw heightened risk of people moving into poverty and malnutrition, which then is accompanied by its own health hazards, which has the potential to become worse than those that COVID-19 brought. And at the same time, African governments, most of them are not in a position to provide comprehensive, effective social welfare. So that meant that lockdown measures were going to be a very short-term, temporary reality, and that was the case. So after about a month or 2 months of strict lockdown, in some cases, restrictions were lifted, whilst we were still on the upward slanting part of the curve in terms of discovering virus cases. I'm in South Africa, that was very much the case for us. It's almost business as usual, but we are seeing an exponential increase in case numbers, but measures are gradually being lifted and restrictions are being lifted. And that's obviously leading to an even sharper increase in cases, and that's happening also in other countries. So, but then it is that it's a difficult balance to strike between economic well-being of people and how to deal with the virus. So I don't envy the decision makers who are tasked with this process. So it was very, very complex. So what the future holds, I think most countries have sort of accepted the fact that coronavirus is part of our reality now, and that it's unlikely that we have the healthcare systems and the capacity in place to completely bring the caseload down to zero and prevent new cases from occurring like was done in China and New Zealand. So what's happening is that governments are just trying to minimize the rate at which new cases are appearing, but accepting that there'll be new cases until there's a vaccine. So the hope is just now that the virus will gradually spread among the population and immunity will gradually build within the population. Unfortunately, that's going to come at a human cost, and it seems that governments have accepted that until there's an effective vaccine in place. Just because the economic cost and then the accompanying cost to people's well-being and also health, I think has been sort of identified as something that could be greater and more devastating than COVID-19 itself. So yeah, I'll stop there. I think I've gone over my time.
Okay, Leo, thank you very much for your presentation, and your talk bordered on something I really like, trying to look at the balance or create like an equilibrium between saving the economy versus saving human lives. So different governments have, been juggling with these particular dilemma. What should they do? Should they shut down borders, to save life and then the economy suffers, or should they allow people to go about their activities and, lead to further spread of the virus? So it's been a very huge dilemma. I think it was a huge debate, especially in my country, Nigeria, where a lot of economists were, saying things about this situation and critiquing the government's move and all. And this issue also reminds me of the webinar organized by Lukman Akintola with his group, where I think one of my take home from that webinar was on the fact that this current issue of COVID-19 has actually led to an increase in unwanted pregnancy, rape, and even robbery within different communities, because people were losing jobs and they needed to feed. And imagine one having dependents and the person is not, would I say, does not have the capacity to work to provide for the kids. Some of them had to even resort to violence and armed robbery. So these are the kind of situations that governments have been faced with over in the course of handling COVID-19 as it relates to Africa. So thank you very much, Luyo, for your presentation. Now we'll have the second round of our Q&As, so we can ask the speakers questions we have in mind. Okay, yeah, Rana, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much. Well, my question goes to Lukman in specific. Like, I do not claim any expertise on in the areas of like peace and security of China and Africa, but my question is, so Lukman, you talked about the African like free trade agreement, the AfCFTA, and one of the thought I have about the free trade agreements in particular is that it overlaps with a lot of regional agreements, bilateral agreements, and even global agreements. So, for example, let's say Nigeria has a separate free trade agreement with its neighboring countries, and then you must have definitely have like regional agreements. Like I think Lukman mentioned about the ECOWAS, and then you have the AfCFTA, and then you have the WTO on top of it. I was just wondering how these so many initiatives overlap with each other, and then like in the areas of peace and security, how has like Nigeria or the AfCFTA in particular ensured that a lot of these overlapping initiatives does not hamper the peace process or the security process? Yeah.
Thank you for that. That was a very brilliant question. First is that yes, there are existing sub-regional agreements. For instance, in ECOWAS, they are already talking about having a unified ECOWAS currency. I think ECO or ECA, I can't remember the exact name. So there are existing sub-regional agreements, and I know that even in the East African countries, they also have some existing agreements. So, but AfCFTA is an AU agreement, and really it's not really concerned about security. AfCFTA is solely an economic agreement that deals with free movement of persons, goods, and services. However, we can't have economic growth or smooth AfCFTA without talking about the economic side and the security side. And that's why even the AfCFTA so that they can settle disputes and all that. However, like the African Union security outfit, so we also, of course, we work with the AfCFTA Secretariat in promoting security and, of course, any other security outfalls of the project. However, the interesting part of it is that it is difficult to disintegrate AfCFTA from these existing sub-regional initiatives. So what will just happen, or what I suggest, what I think rather is going to happen is that since the major goal is that since the major goal is for economic integration to happen within the continent, it does not necessarily affect what is happening in West Africa in terms of their own regional initiative. However, all it to happen there, they are just going to complement one another. Because like I told you, for instance, there is ECOWAS free movement protocol. The central idea is that a trader from ECOWAS, a trader from Ghana can move freely to Nigeria. A trader from Nigeria can move freely to Benin Republic. So that is a free movement protocol within the ECOWAS state. So ordinarily, it is not supposed to affect one another, rather it is meant to complement. However, if there is no effective implementation, like you rightly said, I foresee some clash of interest and I foresee some challenge. Probably that is also a major further point of research for me and probably other people that deal with regional integration. But I agree with you, and I really think it is meant to be for they are meant to complement each other, but I foresee some kind of clash of interest because of the implementation process.
So do we have another person with question? So Lukman, I would just like to ask, you talked about the AfCFTA, and I'd just like to know what you feel China's role might be, in regards to that, outside of would I say the exchange of expertise, technology transfer. How do you think China can play militarily? Because you talked about you can have economic growth, you can have economic development without having, security in place when it comes to, let's say, probably military security. So how do you think China can play a role in helping African countries, strike this balance between their pursuit for economic development and like an open access where people can move through the continent to facilitate the spread of capital and the spread of human resources. So how do you think China can help facilitate this process?
Thank you, Dixon. And if you follow the last China Africa extraordinary session that held last week or thereabouts, President Xi also made mention of that in his speech, that China will be available to support African countries in their pursuit of AfCFTA. So there are several ways that China has been a major supporter of AfCFTA right from the inception. So, and we are all looking forward to July 2020, which is next month. So we thought it's going to be a very big month for us. However, as regards what China can do in several ways, especially with COVID-19, a whole lot of African countries are broke right now. So, and interestingly, we are already seeing China talking about debt relief. I think that is one major way to get started. Debt relief, debt forgiveness if possible for some so broke countries. So that is a major way to get started, because some of the due dates to pay back those debts are already approaching, and some of these countries have spent a whole lot as regards COVID-19. So I think that is number one way to get started. And another one is as regards the issue of security. First, we should know that China will not unilaterally deploy military to African countries, except probably the issue we're having in Djibouti. Not only China, every other world powers also have their military base in Djibouti. So China would rather, and again, we should also understand that China's definition of security is not just military. The Chinese definition of security is basically developed. So when we are talking in the Chinese context, we are talking about security, we would rather also be pointing to education. We'll be rather pointing to assisting the health care system and all that. So I did a paper before now, and what I said in the post-COVID, what China could do to assist both AfCFTA and any other thing could be to help us, more importantly, to see how they can invest in the agricultural sector of African countries. Because I feel that a whole lot of African countries have been deeply affected and our supply chain, food supply chain, has been deeply affected. And even beyond the issue of food, countries, most African countries need to diversify from natural resources. So I feel like as a viable partner, although there are a lot of agricultural initiatives before now, but I think it is the right post-COVID, it's a major time for China to start looking at how they can help or they can support or partner with African countries in building that resilience in that area of feeding themselves, and of course, making money in that angle. And another thing could also be health sector, the health sector, which is very important. And of course, in the security part, which is the traditional security part in this sense now, we'll be talking about probably engaging in how most our military can learn or be better in engaging in asymmetric warfare. And it goes beyond just kinetic and non-kinetic weapons, but they need to know how to respond, how to be proactive when dealing with some of these guerrilla warfare guys. So that is what I think China could do moving forward. There is a whole lot of things. However, I would also say that it is very important that we need to start talking about looking inward too. Why China is a viable partner and China will be willing to do a whole lot for the continent. African countries need to start looking inward and doing something effectively for themselves. And of course, it is then that our international partners, which China, of course, is part of them, will work with us effectively.
Yeah. Okay. Gregor, Julia, I think you wanted to ask a question.
Gregor wants to go first. Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Lukmoy, because I really this metaphor about security and the understanding of security in different ways other than the traditional military way. It's actually very interesting also for further further exploration. I actually had a question prepared for Luyolo regarding COVID-19 and the way of handling COVID-19 because I guess sometimes so China is a country, right? And like the way China has responded to COVID-19 pandemic has been very different from the way the EU, for example, as a union has responded to it, and as Luyolo has said, from the way Africa has responded to it. So I'll go straight forward to my question, that is, taking apart the discourse of whether, more importance or priority should be put on economic rescue rather than human rescue, health rescue. Do you think that possibility for, if not a continental cooperation, at least a regional cooperation at the African level? Because I heard, like from what I heard from your, what I took from your exposition is that very much has been done at a country level, but I wonder if there is any possibility of later cooperation on a regional level on how to deal with COVID-19 and maybe to give responses that can be more long-term rather than short-term. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, so I think I'll firstly say that I think the test for Africa, not only as it regards to COVID-19, but in general, in terms of development, in terms of security and so on, will eventually lie in its ability to effectively coordinate on a regional and continental level. So I think your question's spot on, and that really will be the test when it comes to things like these health-related issues as well, pandemics like COVID-19, because I mean one of the big risks in Africa, in any region really, but here in particular, because levels of development and levels of control of human movement and the kinds of control that governments could exercise over the movement of people differ so much between countries, is that if one country was successful in containing the virus within its borders, movement from countries where there was less effective control could completely upset or undermine one country's success or progress with containing the virus. So I think the test lies in that. I must say though, my opinion is that I'm not convinced that Africa, at least in the short or medium term, will achieve much in the line of effective continental coordination in terms of combating the virus. Because of how complex it is, yes. So the regional body, the AU, is faced with many problems, and it's proven that it hasn't been so effective in achieving collaboration and cooperation on those issues. And it's something that has also that regions that are better coordinated, like the EU, also struggled with. So if it was a challenge there, I don't have much confidence in Africa as a continent being able to overcome this, through effective coordination. And I think the first part of your question also reminds me of another dichotomy that we have in Africa, which is development or freedoms. This comes up a lot also when we try and compare ourselves to China. And it's a complex thing. So it's really not one or the other. It becomes lazy for us to say, no, we're going for the economy and not health, or we're going for health and not the economy. That's lazy, and it would lead to unnecessary loss of life or whatever it is. So there's really a need for a willingness to engage with the complexity of this problem and to come up with a solution in which, to the furthest degree possible, all aspects of it, all the challenges are dealt with in some way or another.
Okay. Gregor.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again to Lukman and Loyola for your presentations again. And
Gregor, your network connection is bad. Can you
Probably
hear me?
You can off your camera or your video or kind of.
Oh yeah, let me stop.
Maybe you can copy Loyola. Yeah. There.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Sorry for that. I was wondering what the impact of COVID-19 was on traditional security issues. You mentioned a lot about, obviously, its impact on the economy, on maybe looking for an effective measures is also a drain on resources. The whole question of the what people call the shadow pandemic and domestic violence and whatnot. But I was wondering if, especially maybe at Lukman in the Sahel region, if the impact on traditional security issues has also been worse, that it's may have exacerbated it because of the drain on resources the crisis has caused in other sectors, or if it's also maybe limited the emergence of conflicts like that. I sort of had this naive notion in the first months that as the world was sort of going on a standstill, that maybe even traditional security issues will be curbed, at least for a while. But as we've seen, especially recently on the Indian border, security issues don't really stop in such a period. So I was wondering what the impact is, what you've seen, and if we'll see maybe more visible reemergence of it in the short term, or if maybe there's more potential for regional cooperation. As Loyola said, there's challenges to that with COVID, but COVID also seems to highlight good regional cooperation. I'll leave it at that. Yeah, what that impact is, what you felt about that.
Thank you, Gregor. Thank you. Yes, the first attack we had was in late February. That was from Boko Haram. They launched they launched a surprise attack on the Chadian soldiers. They killed 92 Chadian soldiers. So, and after that, we also had, right now, we have had an upsurge of banditry attacks in Nigeria. Like they had killed over 100 plus in the past month. So that's to tell you that the security, this traditional security has really escalated for several reasons. Because policymakers are now focused on the health crisis and on the economic crisis. So this gives this group a whole lot of time to plan and of course to also launch a lot of surprise attacks. So we have seen that it's right now, every time you just go to the news in Nigeria, you just see another attack. So it is that bad, and it has escalated even beyond what the resources we have at the moment. And yeah, we also have, like I told you before now, we have the farmers elders clash has subsided, but right now we now have more that also coming up. So this also tells you that a lot of traditional security issues and conflicts are actually rising in during this period of COVID-19. So the question is, how are we going to address it? To be honest, I don't have a viable answer for that. All we can just say is our policymakers to try to redirect, because as much as pandemic is also deadly, these things are also very deadly, even in the real sense. This, of course, in the Nigerian case, the number of people that the terrorist group and bandits have killed during this period alone is way, way more than what the pandemic has done. So that's to tell you that there is a whole lot of crisis that we are facing. So yeah, that is just the reality in some parts of the continent. So yeah, that's what we are facing right now. Yeah.
Charlotte.
Thanks for the presentation. I have two questions for both presenters. So first one is about China's engagement in the process of helping the continent to achieve its free trade agreement. To what extent do you think that China should interfere and engage to facilitate this process with China's non-interference policy? Especially, for example, to deal with COVID-19, there's some Chinese citizens who were attacked, and how, like, what is the like the status or of the government, or in terms of its overseas citizens who are attacked when they're facilitating this process. And the second question is about the relationship of Africa as a continent to achieve its Agenda 2063 and at a country level. For example, a lot of countries have their own agendas to achieve its own national achievements, and there are probably some benefits or some interests which are not really engaged with each other. How do you see that? Thanks.
Leola, are you gonna go first?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. I can
hear you.
So okay, great. So thanks for the question. It's such an important question, because I think it's probably in human nature that we tend to be biased, and I say this when it relates to COVID-19 and the subsequent cases of, I guess, social injustice that we've seen. So there was a huge amount of attention paid to the instance of African people being evicted in Guangzhou. You know, we did see some response from African officials, and there was a huge response from the media and the community in the diaspora and on the continent and so on and so forth. But we cannot complain about that situation and then be silent when you see people in Africa attacking Asians or Chinese people, accusing them of being carriers of corona, which we did see. There were cases of that, and we were silent. We were silent, and that becomes incorrect. So I think the coronavirus has brought to light the fact that I think officials, governments on both sides, I think on the African side, you know, as relates to your question more, are not doing enough in terms of securing the lives also of foreign nationals necessarily. You know, the continent is a resource-starved place and so on and so forth, but you know, you'd still want to see more being done preemptively to stem phenomena like prejudice and you know, attacks on other people because of their appearance and so on. So I think the virus brought to the fore the need for a huge amount of attention to be paid to whether it's awareness both in China and in Africa around the question of, you know, race and so on, because the absence of that has put people at risk. It's put people's lives in danger. A few years ago in Zambia, you remember, you know, Chinese nationals were killed as a result of you know, certain attitudes that had started developing towards you know, Chinese people, and they found expression in that way. So if enough isn't done to stem that preemptively, moments of crisis will bring that to the fore. So I think from a security standpoint, in terms of the logistics of it and the hardware of it, Lukman is probably best placed to answer that. But I think in terms of consciousness and dealing with ignorance and so on, as it relates to racial bias and that kind of thing, we've seen through this crisis the devastating effect that has in Guangzhou, and also the cases that the one who answered the question, the one who asked the question about instances in Africa where Chinese people's lives were at risk.
Lukman, okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that, and Charlotte, thank you for your question. First, I would like to touch on the issue of Chinese engagement, especially in the area of non-interference policy. This question you just raised is a big academic argument, and the interesting part of it is that a whole lot of authors have said that China is not following its non-interference policy. So, but the truth is that when you have non-interference policy, it does not touch on the core of your national interest, which is to protect the lives and properties of your citizens, either within China or outside China. So that's in 2011, when there is the issue of in Libya, the Gaddafi issue in Libya, the Chinese government unilaterally, through the PLA Navy, went there and they deployed their navy to bring out the Chinese citizens. So some said that that is a flout on the non-interference policy, but you wouldn't say because you have a non-interference policy and you allow your citizens to be killed in a foreign land. So that would be irresponsible of the Chinese government, and that will also affect the legitimacy of the Communist Party. So what it means is that the non-interference policy has nothing to do with China protecting the lives of the citizens in other countries. So either it is through COVID or either it is through armed conflict, because we have seen Chinese citizens being killed from armed conflict, even in Nigeria, even in South Sudan, even in Sudan. So we have seen several. So the Chinese government has the role, or let me say the responsibility rather, to go in there and of course protect their citizens. And many a times they do this in through their embassies, and of course that means that the government of the host country is also aware of that. So that might not really have anything to do with the non-interference policy. So it becomes an issue of non-interference policy when the Chinese government unilaterally deploy their military, as we will see from traditional Western countries, and the way they did in Iraq, the way they have been doing in Syria until recently that they had to withdraw. So that's where we can come out to say that they have flouted the issue of non-interference policy. But as it stands right now, I feel like I did a term paper, and one of the things I argue is this particular question. And however, I made mention that moving forward, it might be interesting for China to also put a clause in their definition of non-interference policy. So just to clarify some of these things, because a whole lot of people believe that when China says they will not interfere, so even if their people are dying, they wouldn't interfere. That does not actually, is not the definition. So irrespective, when their interest, and of course, if it's national interest, if it's at stake, they might need to interfere. And that is what we are seeing in Djibouti, because that particular place is very important to the BRI project. So that is what I think is happening. So that's my take about the issue of non-interference policy. And of course, as regards Agenda 2063, definitely Agenda 2063 is more or less like the SDGs that we have globally. So I feel like each African state will just make their own national interest or probably their own domestic goals to key into Agenda 2063. So it doesn't have to conflict. It just has to, of course, to complement, and they see how they can improve the Africa we want as it is stated in the document. So that is my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much for your response to the different questions, and our speakers. Thank you. I think I'll just go back to Letitia. Letitia, are you there? I think Lukman asked the question earlier on, and probably just use about 2 or 3 minutes to respond to Lukman's question.
Yes, I'm back. I'm very sorry. I'm not in Brussels, and the connection is not great where I am. So yes, actually, Lukman's questions were quite similar. So I'm going to. He also had a question about Africa setting the agenda and proactivity. So I'm going to answer this one first, because actually it's a very, very big problem. Is that what I saw during the ACPU negotiation is that Africa has no strategy and no unity when it comes to negotiating with the EU. And I think it's very easy to notice when you look at the publications by the EU from 2015 to today. You will see that they start with a publication saying, oh, this is what could happen after 2020. So you have these different scenarios. And then 2 years later, they're just saying, okay, I think scenario number 2 is better. And then they keep on publishing. So what I mean is that from the start, the EU had a very clear view what they wanted for the post-2020 agenda. And on the ACP side and the Africa side, there was never any kind of negotiation. Basically, the preferred scenario by the EU is the one that we're going to have now. There was no pushing back, no negotiation, nothing. And I think it's a big problem in a lot, even for, I mean, I was working at the Embassy of Ethiopia. It's a very proactive country in foreign policy. I have a friend working at the Embassy of Rwanda in Brussels who tells me the same thing. So even very proactive countries like that with a clear development strategy don't really deal with the EU in a strategic way. So I think it's a pity, really. And so to reply to Lukman about, I think it was about China's aid in the COVID-19 crisis. So I think that if you compare, again, if you compare the way China reacted and the EU reacted, it's a very clear illustration of the differences between these two actors. Because in the case of China, China reacted very quickly, first of all. I think it was the first partner to help African countries. And it wasn't just the government. You had humanitarian aid and private companies also helping and providing masks and medical supplies. So they gave very quickly what was needed most. While on the EU side was saying that they will give 15.6 billion euros to Africa and other countries. And when you look deeper, actually you notice that it's not 15.6 billion, it's actually 3.25 billion that will be given to Africa. And it's not real money, it's reallocated money. So I'm not sure, I think maybe it will come from the EDF, that's the development fund that's made for the African ACP countries, I'm not sure. And yes, so yeah, I think it's very interesting to compare these two type of reactions.
Okay, so that's about that for our presentations, and I really want to say a very big thank you to the presenters as well as those of us who asked questions. Now we'll move to the next aspect of our program, which is the closing address by our mother in the house, Liu Haifang. So would like you to just address us and tell us what you think about the reports, and as well as our presentation so far. Would like to hear like at least an expert's perspective on it here.
Thank you, Dixon. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you. First of all, I want to say to your whole team, congratulations, a big congratulations for you to having such a new version of this report again. And I have communicated it both with sorry, I think I have some. I need to learn about technology. Yes. Yes, I would say I already communicated with several among you about how I feel happy about this new report. And I also have printed and shared with some of the officials, because it's supposed to be what think tank has done. When you already finish something, you have your findings, and you're supposed to circulate your findings. You want to contribute to the policymakers. So me has been just like a bridge as before. If you remember, for your previous issues we launched, we also engage policymakers, whether they are retired ambassadors, but still very active in terms of dealing with the policies, African or China, speakers or researchers or think tanks from other institutions in China, and also some international organizations. So this has been what we have done before. But now, thanks or no thanks to COVID, we have to do launch ceremony in this way. But I really enjoy this panel. You have this speakers who as writers coming to present, but also have a large group of people who come into just sit in and then have a very interesting dialogue about what you have done. So for the whole session, I would say all the presenters, your findings, and also for the questions, for those that engage interactions are very, very interesting for me. This is such a brilliant session. I simply have enjoyed so much. I think the four presenters have dealt with almost every dimension that are key issues for African development, as well as for China-Africa collaborations and beyond this China-Africa. Of course, we know that Leticia deal with this EU Africa. So for me, these are all very important, let alone to pick up another topic which Loyola presented from South Africa. We from us, we miss you. We all miss you. Yes. So he talked about the how current COVID. So I think that they are all very, very valuable. I think if others haven't dealt with the same topic like you, several presenters have done. Simply can learn a lot from what you have found and what you have shared. So also, of course, it's good to get about very important. So I would just pick up several things, maybe as some nuance, from my knowledge I have accumulated, just to add on to the previous presenters. There's several very interesting questions. I won't take too long. Just I think the keyword, as Loyola have already reminded us today, has been really sort of African proactive. And then from the presentation and also from the questions, I think we have even go to different dimensions, different tangents, but still we are sort of trying to look at how African could be proactive or preemptive towards COVID. So this is the keywords I want to say. We have very interestingly discussed a lot about this key. Secondly, I think I cannot not agree more with Julia. If my pronunciation is problematic, I hope you forgive me. Your very interesting presentation about the technology transfer. I think you are so right about this. Is such an important issue. It's key about the current China Africa, but it also open to long-term African development. So it cannot be more important if we look at this dimension. Myself has been doing a little bit of hands-on role, which means 40 years ago, what we have done about technology transfer, and then using my research, I had just send my findings lots of time to different stakeholders in China, trying to appeal for because in the beginning of this century, why large number of Chinese companies coming, or I use the word flood into African continent. We have heard so much about the complaint about too many Chinese labor. And then at the same time, we also knew back then that lots of African governments had for their own either personal agenda or other goal. They just focus on one aim, which is rapidly finish those in infrastructure projects. So in that way, we have seen many Chinese labor. Some of them even not so-called very skilled laborers, but they flood into continent, didn't really create lots of a job, let alone the technology transfer. So back then, I used my research to come in this technology transfer. So back then, I still remember the policy maker said, what is technology transfer? When we talk about technology transfer, we means we buy. We buy from US, we buy from EU. It's like a high technology. Technology can be transferred from those advanced economy. Okay, we should do something to Africa. And so, I mean, there are lots of this using Loyola's word ignorance. It's not only about culture, it's also about Africans' need, what Africans has been. So for me, today we have shown very good example. We have such a research. Julia has covered several countries' case or several dimensions agriculture education. So those are very relevant for me, are very key. And then I would just add maybe one thing. I think currently the technology transfer issue has a very big gap between company need and the public institutions. Like we all know that 2018, why the summit told Xi Jinping announced another 50,000 scholarships, and then how this scholarship would be and how they would processing scholarship and engage scholars like you guys, like Luke coming to China, what kind of skill they would give you, and therefore fit into African need. For me, these are all very important dimensions. So how public institutions can work with Chinese company as well as African side, both policymaker and civil society scholars like you, to really sort of have a clearer agenda about what kind of technology can be shared, can be transferred, either through company level or those indoor training, like what you are doing within the campus. So those are some very key issues for me, I think, for technology transfer. For Leticia, for your research about the EU, I think this sort of inter-regionalism has been there for many years, at least if my memory right, 10 years time, about between two regions, how they can work with each other. I agree lot of your point about the trade and development, especially between EU and Africa. I think there is one thing, so for me, maybe I would like to discuss with you is about politics. You used a word like this political ally, this kind of a relationship hasn't been that strong. I would argue maybe we should think of in different way, because there are previous relationships, metropolitan and the colony relations. So this kind of if we look at France relations with the French-speaking countries, totally different from the Britain Empire, their relationship with the former colony. So there's several colonial powers already had their relation with different African countries. Even we know that French government at this point right now, they want to engage English-speaking countries, and likewise English country, Britain, EU, sorry, UK also wanted to sort of engage French-speaking countries. So these are contemporary part, but historical legacy still very strong, specifically the language, the values, the philosophical link, and then those kind of institutional or invisible institutional links so strong. So for me, these are already kind of allies, or if whichever term you like. So for me, I think more importantly, we probably should think of how to make EU and Africa work for Africa. So you see what I mean? I mean, like we know that BRIC already become a kind of a dialogue platform. It not necessarily we have to have a secretariat. We don't necessarily have a mechanism, but it works in this. It just have this rotating system each year, different summit in different places. As long as there is such a platform, and then it can work. So for me, if EU and Africa or African can sort of proactively engage EU, on the other hand, instead of only waiting for what's coming from EU and only waiting for us to discuss so in length about EPA, this long 20 years agenda, how it will reform room for for this EU Africa to do more research, and also for young scholars like you to contribute as a think tank for each of your governments. I also want to touch upon a little bit about the trilateral, because I simply say there are huge interest among the audience as well as the several scholars. The trilateral is a long story. I cannot use only one sentence to finish because it has been there in terms of a dialogue since 2006 when China firstly held its summit with Africa. And then EU has been very positive. I can even tell you a whole hour story about what UK has said. And of course, different EU members also had their different bilateral platform with China. If you look at France, the so-called third market cooperation with China has been very interesting. How they started from Afghanistan, and then now they are moving to African post-conflict resolution. So these are all very interesting dimensions. We cannot generalize to say that EU. I think EU already very complex. So how EU can be together is one big problem, one challenge already. And then when maybe we can even look at the smaller levels, the country level, national level, to look at whether it's possible. I have been looking at a lot of Germany and China, and so in Beijing, if you are interested, some of you already in Beijing, you can do some with. There is a China-German Sustainable Development Center established in 2000, if my memory right, 17. So this is really focused on our agenda. So these are all very interesting dimensions that we could look at each one. And for now, according to my own research, UK has set up a good example since China started to include Africa into its BRR. So since 2017, when Africa is engaged by BRR, UK has, through Chamber of China UK, they have focused on a lot of they call the Silk Road BRR, this research. So according to their research, they found that between China and the BRR countries, G2G, government to government, B2B, business to business, infrastructure has been improved a lot. So now it's African countries, how they can tap into opportunity. And for UK business circle, they have done a lot, like they know that BRR's building is the interconnections, firstly, like infrastructure, the hard infrastructure for transportation, or the one for the communication. They know they have a lot of advantages, like energy, like economics. They have lots of this kind of supplies advantages, can engage, can join to the China Africa or China BRR corporations. So they identify these advantages, and therefore they also work with BRR in a way, especially in Africa. And another example I also want to share is not with EU country, but with Japan. You all know famous Japanese companies called Rili, what's the Haichi? Yeah, I think if Guo Yuanyuan, you can correct me. 日立公司的名字 Chinese English name is Haichi, right? Yeah, if I'm wrong, I can send you the right one later. So this Japanese company got a project with Libya, and the Libya government request. Yes, I can see Mendoz sent me high touch. Yes, thank you. Why the high touch got this project? The Libya government actually suggests you have to make sure 50% supply coming from China to reduce our cost. So then this high-tech company start to realize that they have to, there is no way to escape from collaboration with China. So for me, the ideal picture probably for in future for either BR or for other international collaboration is the complementary way, and for each actors to identify its comparative advantages and to really using your advantages to join the big pictures. So each one should have some sort of a labor division. So that's my my strong point. We cannot just use very political language, only say there is only confrontation, competition. For me, I would like to stimulate think tank, the policymaker to think in this way. You have a very much complementary position instead of confrontation. So these are some thoughts. I think I have spent too much time. Let me just finish very quickly. I think the security issues has been very well answered and dealt by Lukman. I won't add too much for this one, and what he raised as a concern about Africans' long-term development, and also the question he answered very well about this overlapping for different African regional organization. I think all are very well said. I do agree with. I think in long term, probably I would rather say this African different regional organization is a learning process. So different organization is, if we look at ECOWAS, we would understand immediately there was nothing to do with security. But by and by, since there is security challenges, so they sort of have a kind of a U-turn to include, to add such a dimension. So for me, instead of just to look at which each regional organization, how they are building up their institution, why not we look at their functions? If we can stick with the functions for each organizations, what they are doing, they are facing to what kind of challenges, like the COVID lately, I would say they could be called effective. So that's my approach. So I already mentioned COVID, and then I think Loyola already answered the question about this regional approach. I just want to add, according to my own research, EU has been so important in terms of this COVID, the fight with COVID for this latest situation. For the test capacity in the beginning, there was none, and then South Africa and then Senegal had these two labs. And then now there are 52 countries can do the test. So just within 2 months' time, EU CDC helped to establish such a profound capacity for the basic test. Without a test, we cannot, as Loyola said, to balance between development and your health prevention and protections. So these are all very important dimensions. For me, I even want to suggest these AUs and apply COVID for this time, or should be taken as a very, very good case for regionalism. because if you look at other regions for EU, you want to see such a very successful, at least in the beginning, such a very unified approach. But EU made it. For me, that's a very big progress. And even though I know the Loyola said the current challenges are so true, but how in long term we whole human being are learning how to balance between development and your health. So it's not only Africa is facing these challenges. So for me, this is the situation for everyone. And yeah, I think I stop here because all of us have done so good studies. And then the key words I said, the preactiveness and the preemptive approach for Africa still should be in long term. I think for us as Africanists, be where we are, we should encourage this approach instead of still waiting the other conventional media just only tell us one story, that the dark continent story. We actually are seeing very active, positive, even not reactive, I would say. There are lots of proactive approaches and very innovative approaches from Africa. So that's what I want to emphasize. And again, I want to say congratulations to you all. I think we should really say thanks to the team, the editing team, to Hassan, who is so quiet, who is so silent, but has done so much for the team, and the others. I want to repeat all the names. Thank you all. Thank you for giving me the chance. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much to Laosher for your contribution, and on behalf of the team, yeah, a very big thank you. So we are at the end of today's program. I also want to say on behalf of the PATT team, the editorial team, as well as the events team, want to say a big thank you to everyone who took out their time to be present for today's activity. We are 11 minutes over time, and I didn't just want to stop Lila Laosher because I believe that we could learn one or two things from her. So as I just allowed her to go, but hopefully for subsequent events, we'll try as much as we can to keep to time. So a very big thank you. And just one small request, for those of us who have our cameras turned off, I would plead, can we turn on our camera so that we just take like a screenshot of just like a group picture. So if you can turn on your camera, you don't need to say anything, just, yeah. Freddie, look at your handsome face and you were hiding. Oh, Samu, interested. Okay, so we're still waiting for Messi first, Emma. Oh, okay, we can. So, cheese, come on, smile. I need to see those beautiful faces. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we'll be organizing another event for next week. Hopefully the flyer should be available by tonight or latest tomorrow. So we have something else cooking for us. So I enjoin you to try to register for the next event and invite your friends and try to participate. And with the situation and activities being online, we'll be having a lot more online activities to engage us. So let's just look out for them. Thank you very much, Hassan. Thank you, Letitia. Thank you, everyone here. Thank you, and have a good night rest. Zaijian.